Hello everybody, hello everyone, I think I'm live now. Looks like everything is running all right. YouTube is here. Hello James, hello Louisa. Looks like it's not picking up the chat though. Let's see if Facebook is live as well. Yep, Facebook is running as well. Brilliant. Hello James, good to see you. You're very welcome, thank you. Please do drop me a little comment, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, just to let me know if you can see me and if you can hear me all right. Looks like everything's working okay, so we should be fine, I think. And it's nice to see you all again. It's been a little while. First stream this week. I was actually meant to get on yesterday, but I had one of those days yesterday, so I didn't make it. So we're back today. So today I don't know if you saw the two streams that I did last week, where I have this rose subject, and I've been doing a little kind of a mini series on what I generally think of and describe as seeing as a painter sees, which is slightly different way of perceiving, let's say. Perceiving is probably a better way than a better word for it than seeing. So seeing the subject that you can see on the right, just in terms of general light and shadow shapes. And if you get that right at the beginning of a painting, it can give you a much stronger start. Help you get an impression of light and depth and all of that stuff, get the relationships right before you start fiddling about with the detail, which is, as we all know, is very easy to get into too soon. So I'm going to show you, actually let me full screen the palette and I'll show you what I'm up to, because I'm mixing colours at the moment. So I'm just going to take off the reference photo just for a second. Hey Todd, good to see you. Hi Becky. Thank you for letting me know it's all good. That's brilliant to hear. Shall I keep the reference up? I'll keep the reference up actually, because it's good to see the colour mixing in relation to that. So, as you probably know, if you've ever seen anything I've ever done online, I'm a monster type of dude. So what I'm doing now is I'm mixing up exactly the colours. Well, I might be adding a couple, but I'm basically mixing the colours that I used to paint the original simplified version. So this is my two lights, because I've got two different kinds of roses, one more towards green and one more towards orange. This is the colour that I used for the central part of the main rose, if you like, and now I'm mixing the shadow colours. And I've decided today to do, I think I just used one last time, I can't remember actually, but I've decided today I've got two different values. If anybody's interested, this is a value 4 and this is a value 3. So at the moment, the shadows are a value 4 on the painting. I might go as low as 3 and I might not. We'll see. Because what I want to do, I'm mostly going to work on the flowers today. I've got enough on the painting that I can start working a little bit more on the flowers. So I want to stay within the value range that I've established. Otherwise, everything will fall apart, right? We don't want that. Would be a nightmare. Hello, Jerry. You're very welcome. Jerry says, I'm glad you're doing the third lesson. There might even be a fourth, because I would like to get, I don't know if I'm going to get onto the vase today. It's quite late in the day for me already. Let's mix up some more of these colours so you can actually see me mixing. So this one I've already done. No, I tell a lie. That one I've already done. So let's do a lighter version. So I've got raw umber. This is green gold, a little bit of that. We'll need probably a little bit more chroma and send it slightly more orange. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of transparent red oxide, and then bring it up to the value I want with white, and we'll see where we are. This is lead white I've got here. Not enough chroma. Thought that might happen. So we'll bring in a bit more TRO, a bit more green gold. I'm too high in value anyway, so actually, funny enough, that's ending up really a lot closer to the more orangey one that I was going to mix, so I might just keep that as the orangey version. This basically, these are, it's bang on, I'll keep that. These are basically, these are the same value, they're the same chroma. In Munsell terms, these are a chroma 4. And they are very slightly different hues. Let's mix the greeny one now. A little bit more green gold this time. Very small amount of TRO. Transparent red oxide, so powerful. Green gold is very nice as well. It's a good, you know, bit of, we want raw umber in there. Bit of raw umber. The reason I use lead white mostly is because it dries more quickly, so it often means that I can work on the lights areas of a painting within a couple of days for a second session, whereas if I'm using titanium, what tends to happen is that it just takes forever to dry. I like the way it feels as well. I think it has a really nice, oh, I'm out of raw umber. Been painting all day today. Started about 10 o'clock this morning and finished about 6. That's a long day painting for me. I don't usually do more than about 4 or 5 hours painting in a day because I find my focus goes after a while. Let's try and keep up with the chat as well. Mustafa says, I was just watching an old video by you. Yeah, there's a lot of them out there now. I've been putting out stuff for, oh, I dread to think how long now. There's a lot of videos out there of me chuntering on about colour and all kinds. Mostly colour, to be fair. Hello, Treasure, nice to see you. All right then. That's too dark. Bring up the value. The chroma is too high, so this is going to drop the chroma. Again, if you're used to seeing me paint or do anything online, you'll know that I generally do everything I do with Munsell. I use Munsell for the colour. Too far, went too far, bring it back down. So when I talk about value, everybody knows what value is, right? Dark to light. Hue is like the name of the color. So is it an orange? Is it a green, yellow? Is that good? It's all right. The chroma is a little bit high, but it's all right. And chroma is how intense the color is. So very low chroma is near to gray and neutral, and high chroma is very intense. So I just want to get these colors mixed up, and then I can start thinking about basically what I want to do with this painting next. I mean, I know that I want to work on the flowers today. I'm probably going to do like half an hour on the flowers. I just want to show you what happens when I start to go into a little bit more detail. So at the moment, I know you can't see the picture at the moment, but at the moment the flowers are extremely simplified. So I just want to start adding a bit more. smaller forms, basically, breaking them down, doing a little bit of work on the edges, trying to bring the form out a little bit, because I'm in a happy place with the painting at the moment. I'm quite pleased with the overall look of it, the overall values. I think the values are nice. I think the color is nice. There's a couple of places I might want to drop the chroma, but overall we're pretty much there. That'll do nicely. Oh, I just mixed the same color twice. I didn't mean to mix that one, look. You know it's getting late in the day when you mix the same color twice. I meant to do this darker one here. Oops. Hello, Mike. Nice to see you. Vicious Moose says, is it possible to apply Munsell technique to watercolor painting? I think it's tricky. I think you could. You know what? If you look up Michelle Clamp online, she's got a good blog. So I think if you search for her name, find her blog. She's a watercolor artist and she's also Munsellist. And I think you may find that she might have some stuff on that. I'm not sure. But I don't actually do watercolor. So, I mean, I know you approach it in a very different way. You know, you kind of work from the lights down, don't you? And you gradually bring down the values and bring up the chroma of the colors as you go. I think, to be honest with you, I think it fits better with more opaque paint like this, like oil paint or acrylic. It's more immediate. So I think it's a better fit, but I mean, it's just a color system, so I don't see why it shouldn't be possible to do something with it. So that's a bunch of colors mixed. So the first thing I'm going to do, I mean, this painting is dry now. You said checking it quickly. Yes, it is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got some oil here. It's got a little bit of terps in it, but this was mixed for the start of a painting. I started a painting today. I've been putting together the subject for a couple of days and deciding on how to do it. And today I actually put some paint on the canvas, the panel. So this is actually, that had a little more solvent. So the solvent I use is pure gum turpentine. And at the start of a painting, I tend to have a bit more solvent in. And then as I go further through in further layers, I tend to add more oil. So this is just a makeup sponge. I'm going to get some oil on this. This is called oiling out, by the way. And it means that I will be able to basically work wet into wet over these flowers. So I'm just going to scrub this on over the area that I'm going to be painting on. Let's put it over there as well, actually, because I might fill in that corner. Is that covering well? I need to make sure it really gets into the surface. Sometimes I have to press it a little bit. To get it to take, and I'm spreading it like around the flowers as well, in case I want to go out into the background a little bit. I mean, I could cover the whole painting, but I'm not actually planning to paint on the whole painting, so it doesn't seem a lot of point really. And then I'll wipe it out a little on the background so that I end up with a gentle gradation from the wet oil out to the dried paint. Oiling out. Donaldo says, can we see the pears in the vase again? Yeah, I don't see why not. I'll show you this first, actually. This is the one I started today. Still very wet. Here's my stone pot again. So that's, for me, that's about, I don't know how many, somewhere between 6 and 8 hours painting. And I've just fallen in love with this stone pot, so there's probably going to be a few of these turning up. Here's the pears. There's the pears in the vase. I think it's probably finished, but every now and again I look at it and I think maybe I'm going to do a little bit more on the cloth. I'm not sure though. I'm not sure. Undecided. Let's hope I don't drop this wet painting on its face. That would be bad. So busy in Studio Foxton at the moment, lots of painting going on. Thank you. So obviously I have to work from the photo now because the flower's long gone. So I'm mostly going to be thinking about trying to refine some of the shapes. Still squinting down mostly, try and refine some of the values and refine some of the shapes. And I'm probably going to be working, I'm going to start off around this area because this is the kind of the key bit. So for me, when I'm coming a bit further into a painting, I would be thinking about, well, where's the focus now? A painting that's at this stage anyway, where's the focus now? And the focus I want to be around here. You know, I might get away with leaving that like that and just doing a small amount of painting on it and that as well. But this is kind of important, that area there. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to... I left that so that you could, while I was working on the other section, you could see an area of white panel against it, just to show, you know, that it really wants to go now. It's going to take a couple of coats, I think, probably to fill it in. So what I would generally be using is, right, these are Rosemary's Eclipse brushes, angled eclipse brushes, synthetics. They're quite nice. Those are the 1/4 inch ones, the small ones, which I'll use if I'm doing any detail. I've got, this is Winsor & Newton Scepter Gold, nice brush. Often use that for leaves. Is a bigger angled eclipse. All this stuff out of the way. So originally I painted this whole area as one shape. But this is actually 2 flowers, so I think I'm going to start working in there to begin with. You're very welcome. Of these videos, thank you. You're very welcome. I'm really glad you like them. Mustafa says, how do you decide the colours of the shadows when you can't hold the chips and when there are hue shifts in the shadow? There are hue shifts in the shadows, but I have simplified it, the shadow colours. So now I have got hue shifts in my shadow colours on the palette, so I can add some hue shifts. So I'll add a little bit more of that as I go. But I decided them, those colours, through a combination of doing colour notes on the original setup when the flowers were still alive, and the photograph. I generally work, these days, I kind of work from a combination of both. Usually start off working from life and then gradually as time goes on, it kind of get into a bit more of, I have to use the photo, you know, as time goes on. This is actually, there's a mistake in the drawing here. This shadow area here should come further round. Like that. So you can see there, like I've just put that little bit there down, and it's exactly the same value as I used here. Nice. Gonna try bringing the value down just a little, just at the back of this rose, to start to show. So I'm starting to break down the division between this rose and this area over here. So like the hard work of getting all of the values right and the colors right and getting the big look together, that's happened now. And I'm quite happy with that. You know what, I'm going to need some lower chroma as well here of about that value. So let's get some raw umber and white so I can drop the chroma. If I'm on the orange to yellow orange side of the hue wheel, I tend to use raw umber, mostly raw umber and white to drop chroma. It's not a neutral, but it's a low chroma, yellowy orange, because I think I might want to drop a bit of chroma. Let's try it there. Drop a bit of chroma around here. So this flower actually comes up. So I want to start refining the shapes now. Yeah, no, I'm going to want some black in there as well. It's not quite what I wanted. Actually, I think it wants to go a bit green. So I do quite a bit of, when I'm actually painting, I do quite a bit of mixing on the fly. So I start off with what I think of as my anchor colors, which are the ones I have here, which I know are good. You know, I know those are right. And then I'll use those as a starting point for adding more colors. So I'm trying to get this. So dropping the chroma here gives this kind of blush of chroma just in the shadows there, and immediately this shadow is now looking a little deeper, which is nice. We can bring in a little bit of actually this is in the wrong place, it should be over there. And I'll just mix straight between these colors. I mean, I know a lot of people who do Munsell mix like a whole string with all the intermittent values. I tend to get the shadow and the light and then mix between them. Personally, I find works pretty well. So there's a really beautiful, gentle highlight there. A little bit of light coming into the shadow. I don't want to get too involved in detail yet, though. Not too much detail. I just want to start differentiating these shapes. One of the nice things about working into an oil couch when you're painting flowers and you're on like a, you know, I'm on the second session of the flowers, is that I can get the softest, most beautiful gradations pretty much effortlessly. And that's a really lovely thing about working into a couch. Hello, Diane, nice to see you. Yeah, sometimes if you see the video freeze, to be honest, it's generally your internet connection. I have good internet here and generally manage to stream pretty steadily. So if you just refresh the page, it'll usually come back. So if I wanted, I don't really want to do too much of this at this stage, but if I wanted to add a bit of detail here, like there's a hard edge of a petal, that's just to show you that's what these brushes are very good at. So there's a petal that comes down here. edge of a petal, I can just use the edge of this brush. Bring it into the oil as a little highlight, like that works really nicely. If you've never tried painting like this, like putting down like a first layer and then working a second layer into an oiling out and working a second layer into it, I would highly advise trying it. It's just such a nice way to paint. It's very easy to control. Francis says, I love this, but I noticed the right side of the vase is curved unlike the left side. Do you mean this bit here? That's just a bit of shoddy painting. I mean, when I'm in the first stage, I'm not really thinking too much about perfection of drawing. You know, I want it to be reasonably accurate, but stuff like this I'm not bothered about because I can fix that on the fly. What I really want is I want my roses to live now. And if I stay within this value range, hopefully I won't go too dark. That went a bit too green actually. Hopefully I won't go too dark, and I'll make sure, like what happens a lot when people paint flowers is they go too dark in the shadows. So if you have it like really carefully set up and controlled like this, it's a lot easier to make sure that that doesn't happen. So there's a whole area around this. Oh, there's a higher chroma shadow there, which is going to show that next flower starting. So this is really quite subtle, but the division between these two flowers, this one and this one here, is mostly shown by a chroma change. Not much value change, and it's a very subtle chroma change as well. So there's a bit of more chroma in this shadow here, and then if I can just drop the chroma a little bit further here. I don't actually know, that might actually be too subtle even to show on the camera, I don't know. What is your opinion on Liquin? This is just an opinion, okay? I have used it a long time ago, and personal opinion only, I find it absolutely awful. It sets up too fast, and I think it has a weird plasticky kind of look to it, which I really don't like at all. I'm sorry, I don't, honestly. I mean, the thing is, I mean, it's all right if you know, I guess it's okay if you get on with it well. I mean, it's whatever gives you the best results, you know, really. But for me, I find it dries too quickly. That I want a long open time, you know. If I put a couch down, I want 6 7 to 8 hours, just in case I've got the stamina that day to manage it and paint for that long. As I say, usually I wouldn't paint as long as I painted today. Usually I would usually paint maybe maximum probably 4 to 5 hours a day. So I tend to try to be careful when the edges of things go in to try and create a little bit more detail. So I'm starting to differentiate these two flowers now from starting with just a single single shadow shape. Now I'm just trying to break it down a little bit and differentiate them. Hopefully you can see this happening. Actually, this one, come around a little bit, and I tend to try to use the brushes to paint the form. You know, to use the kind of, I call it the calligraphy of the brush. You know, some brushes are seem to lend themselves to it, and these synthetic flats, I don't think there's anything miraculous about these Rosemary's ones. The Winsor & Newton Scepter Gold are really good as well. The nice thing about the Rosemary's flats is the angle. So it's you can get some really nice flower shapes with them without really trying too hard, you know. You can kind of let the brush speak a little bit, too light, and get some really nice effects. So this is like, all of this is still pretty much in shadow, really. So I'm being very careful to make sure that I don't allow the values to get too high in this section. Because then it will start to look like light. And we don't want that yet. It's kind of like that sort of light within the shadow. So I don't want too high value in here yet. Oh, here's the kitten wanting in. Thank you. Hello, little man. You're all right then. Been sitting in the garden, huh? Plastico, yeah, Liquin Plastico. Jerry says, Munsell question, what would you say about using Munsell chips possibly becoming a crutch to a beginner and hindering the process of learning and mixing colour? I would say, Jerry, that it's absolutely the opposite. It helps you learn to mix colour much more quickly. I think you may be kind of conflating a little bit the colour judging and the colour mixing, because they're quite different things. I think if you could make an argument that if you use a tool, say Michel's amazing Munsell tool, to show you the colours in a photograph and to then give you the Munsell chips that match that, I guess you could, it's not an argument I would particularly agree with, but you could make an argument that that is kind of a crutch, and you're not learning to judge colour so much. But if that worries you, I personally don't think it should, but if that does worry you, then what I would recommend you do is design exercises for yourself to make sure that you stretch the ability of judging colour. So a tool like Michel's can then be incredibly useful, because you can use it to check your guesses. So you can put a photo into it, you can guess what chip you think a particular area is, you can guess the value, you could guess the hue. or the chroma as well, or all three, and then test it and see how close you came. And that kind of instant feedback mechanism is basically how we learn, and is a really, really useful and effective way to practice the feedback mechanism. Now, from a point of view of mixing, I think it actually helps you learn, because if you do a lot of mixing using Munsell chips, like just mixing Munsell chips almost as an abstract exercise, so not actually looking for a particular color of a thing in the world, but just trying to match a chip. If you do a lot of that, what happens over time is that you evolve a kind of a mental representation, a mental map of the color space. Because that's all Munsell is, really. That's how I think about it more than anything else. It's a map. It's a map to the color space that we can reach with paint. And who wouldn't want a more complete and sophisticated map of the colors that you can reach with paint? Because that then helps you learn to mix much more quickly, much more quickly. So I think actually, as far as certainly as far as mixing goes, the opposite is the case. It helps you to learn mixing more effectively and more quickly, both. So I actually think it's one of its great advantages is that it can help you learn to mix color very, very effectively. Personal opinion, obviously, I paint with Munsell, so you know. But I wouldn't, I don't try to force it on anybody. I use it when I'm teaching. I think it's an incredibly useful thing for people to see color going down right off the end of their own brush. I'm just refining some of these shapes by cutting in with the background here. So what happens a lot, I think, is that when I mean, we're all always learning. Obviously, I'm always learning on a daily basis. But when you're nearer the beginning, let's say, of your learning journey, you tend to, your color will be out a lot of the time. All of the time, basically. Because judging color is very difficult. Our visual systems aren't designed for it, and it's a skill that you need to develop over time. And it does take time to develop it. Sorry, I'm just getting a bit involved in this flower here and trying to nail that value, so it just looks like it's just poking out of the shadow. So until you actually get to experience good color going down, you're always going to be guessing, and you will never be sure. Again, it's like when you see good color going down, that's your feedback mechanism that shows you, what's a good color to use in a particular place. Like the feeling of really nailing your values is invaluable, I think. It's an invaluable experience. Because you get to see actually what value will work. Say this shadow area here. Most people would paint that way too light. But if you have an independent check like a Munsell value scale like this, and you're down in a value, well, that's like a 1.5. And if I'm teaching, and if I can say to you, put a value 1.5 there, and you put it down, and you would be ordinarily maybe 2 steps higher, and then you see how that works against the light, and you're more likely to get those kind of light bulb moments with color that my teaching is trying to give you. Where you can say, oh, that's way darker than, I hear people say this a lot in workshops. Oh, that's much darker than I would have thought, but it actually looks right. That's much lighter than I would have thought. That's much lower chroma than I would have thought. That's a big one. But it actually looks right. I would never have mixed that color, but look, I just put it down and it looks really right. You know, that, and having that experience, I think, is incredibly valuable. So no, I don't think it's a crutch. What I think it is a very effective way to learn. There's no point, and painting is hard enough. There's no point in learning how to do it harder than it needs to be. I'm moving up to this flower now because I'm quite happy with these here and thinking about what I can do with this one too, to bring it on a little bit. So I'm trying to work in, I suppose, what you could call now medium-sized shapes. Is that going to be too high chroma? Yes. Medium-sized shapes. So I'm adjusting chroma and hue on the fly as I'm going. But now that I've got my my foundation down of my strong start, then everything is just related to what's already there now, and it just makes the job so much easier. Does that make sense, Jerry? That's how I look at it. It's just a very effective way to learn. So my goal here really is to start to create these flowers whilst painting the minimum amount of detail that I need to paint. So at the moment, I'm just trying to establish smaller forms. That's way too dark. That's so dark, I'm going to take it off. I always think of like when you've got something established like this and you start to work into it, and you put down something that's obviously wrong, like I just did then, it's almost like it's a swear word on the, you know, it stands out like a swear word stands out in a conversation. And it really, it jars, you know. And when you see something like that going down, you really need to just get in there straight away and sort it out. I'm really tempted to get into some detail here, but I'm trying not to. I'm trying very hard not to get too involved. Sorry, I'll catch up on the comments in a minute. I'm really enjoying myself at the moment. The second stage painting stuff I think is really enjoyable. You know, when you've got the kind of the heavy lifting done. In the beginning stages. And you know, it's much more difficult to make a mistake at this point, because I know that most of what is down there is right. Kind of within the parameters that I've set myself to paint within. Just gradually bringing up this value here to try and show a little bit of light coming through that row. And I'm gradually working up to the main rows at the front, which I'm going to work on in a little while, just getting everything around it. I guess I do this quite a lot, actually. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a thing that you should do, but it's something I noticed that I do a lot myself, is that I tend to prepare the area around something I'm going to paint and then paint it. So I'm painting the roses around it, putting a little bit more detail into those at the moment before I go for that. that main rose. Let's blend some of this a little to soften it. Some forms starting to come. Thank you. Are you using linseed oil as a couch? Yes, a mixture of linseed oil with a small amount of pure gum turpentine. Gizaressa says, aside from orchestrating value, do you think about the form's relation to the space? Do you feel the space and carve out the form mentally? Yes, I absolutely do. What I'm mostly thinking about is, like, I'll look at parts of the form and I'll think about, when I'm at this stage, and I'll think about what angle they are to the light. It's slightly more complicated when you're working on flowers because you've also got to think about, is light traveling through it? Because you get light traveling through the petals, you know, so that can change the values a little bit. But yes, absolutely, I'm thinking about that all the time. What angle is this to the light? How much light is falling on it? How do I describe that? Is it a chroma shift that's going to get that, or is it a, you know, a value shift, or what is it? What's happening to the light there? What's happening to the form in relation to the light? Yeah, that's a big part of how I think about painting, definitely. When I'm at this stage, for sure. I think I've gone a bit light there. Bring that back down again a little bit. Jerry says, I love your thorough answer and I found this to be true. Brilliant, that's good. I found mixing colours to be so much more predictable using Munsell. Yes, it is. There's a lot less guesswork involved. That's brilliant to hear. Jerry, you just completely made my day. Thank you so much. She says, as a beginner, I find your insight true to my experience thus far. Stick with it. Stick with it. It just gets better, seriously. It just gets better. Thank you. James says, that's a spectacularly good explanation of the value of adopting a Munsell Big Book of Colour to more successfully learn to develop that skill for learning to make accurate value hue comment. You're very welcome, James. Thank you. Useressa says, I'm thinking about the difference between shape 2D and form 3D. Yes. So in the first stages, I'm thinking much more in 2 dimensions. I want to get the shape accurate, and I want to get the value of a block, the overall value of a block accurate. Now, in this stage, I'm gradually, sorry, I keep getting in front of the camera. I've got it badly placed today. I don't know why I did that, but in this stage, I'm gradually thinking more, I'm allowing more 3-dimensional thinking to come into it. I'm still trying not to get too involved in detail, but the 3-dimensional thinking is featuring more now. And it's one of the complications of painting, I think, is that you need to be able to think in terms of both. You need to be able to think in terms of 2D and 3D. But I like to get all of that. I think it really helps if you get all of that 2D stuff nailed at the beginning. Because when you start thinking, I think if you start thinking about form and planes right at the beginning, it's very easy to get inaccurate shape, to start thinking about the things that you're painting. And your mental idea of what that thing is can easily override a kind of a straight sort of a visual perception of what shape something is, what colour it is, you know, because our visual systems just aren't set up for that job at all. They really aren't. We're terrible at it. We didn't evolve to paint. It's deeply inconvenient, but we just didn't. Our perception systems involved for different jobs. So we have to try and find ways to override our normal ways of perceiving the world. and the subjects that we paint in order to be able to see them as a painter sees them, with patterns of light and shadow. But yes, definitely now I'm starting to think more in terms of 3D shape and form. That's a most perceptive point. Thank you for bringing it up. I'm also bringing in a little more kind of edge handling now as well, softening some edges where I think I want them to be softer. So it may well be that if this rose comes out nicely, there's very little that I need to do in the whole of the rest of the painting, you know. I mean, they're starting to come now to stand out. But there's no way that this would have been working as well as it is now if I'd have just gone straight in doing each flower individually. Donalda says, when your brain understands what you're seeing, it certainly makes it easier, and that takes time. Yeah, I always say, I feel this is true, that painting is a combination of what you see and what you know. Painting is a learned thing. It's a specific way, realistic painting, it's a specific way of perceiving, you know. And it is a skill, and it can be learned. And there are more effective and less effective ways to learn it. Let's have a look at this rose on the front now. So what value have I got here? This is a value 4. I want to be a little lighter than that. Let's say a 5. I'm thinking about those kind of higher chroma shadow areas. Good. I don't want to go straight in with detail. I want to start. It has the beginnings of a feeling of the correct form, this rose, like it feels like a cup. But I need to bring in more shadow here because the light is coming down from this side. Going back to talking about 3D form, now I'm thinking about the light is coming down here. So some of it is going through these petals, but by the time we get into the middle here, not much light is going through. So I want to be about a value. These shadows are like 3 to 4 now, so I know that I want this to be lighter. And you know, you can absolutely learn this stuff. So if I check the value that I'm thinking about putting down there, I want it to be about a 5. That's about a 5, so it should be about right. Looks a bit too green though. Too green. So I'll get it a bit more orange, but about the same value. 5. Too light now. I want chroma in there too, because it's so there's 2 types of roses here. One is slightly more towards orange and one is more towards green. I want this color to be right when it goes down. That's about a value 5. Think about that for a bit. James says, why not develop a larger number of value and color strings to speed up progress, or just pick out a dozen Munsell chips that you think will make a great start at least? Yeah, I mean, as I say, a lot of people do that. They work with a fuller string. I guess my approach is slightly different in that I mean, some people look at Munsell as like a scientific thing. Like you can say, if I know what the local color is, then I can tell you what the shadow color is going to be. And, you know, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There isn't, and it is a really effective way to use it. I like to allow some wiggle room, so that I know, you know, what you could say the correct color would be there, if there is such a thing. But this is also painting, and I might not want to use the exact same color every time. You know, it might work out that I want to, mostly the differences that I want to use are value based. So sometimes, especially, it depends on the subject, but sometimes, let's say I'm painting high chroma flowers, like daffodils, I will tend to push the value of the shadows higher and use a slightly different value balance. And the reason I do that is because it allows me to get more chroma into the shadows. Because, you know, if you look at, I'll show you a Munsell page to explain what I'm talking about. Some of the pages aren't on this, but you can see here, this is chroma from near neutral to very intense color over here. And this is value from dark to light. So as you go up the value range, the chroma gets higher. You can get more chroma out of colors the higher the value as you get, and then until you get right to the top, and then it drops off again. So you get this kind of, I call it the chroma curve. And you will also see that on objects, you know. So if that was the local color of an object, the light and shadow, I could plot it and it would be like that, a curve like that. If that was the local color, it would be like this. On the outside, the chroma curve would be on the outside. I call it chroma curve just as a shorthand. It's actually chroma and value. But I don't like to formularize the way that I paint things too much, because, as I say, I want to leave enough wiggle room so that I can change things a little in order to, I hope, get a stronger result. So we can't hit the value range that we see in the real world anyway. We can't get anywhere near it. Like even a simple subject like this, indoors, you know, in natural light, I can't hit the value. I can't hit the whole value range here because I've got a dark local in shadow and I've got a light local in light. The original subject is well outside my value range of paint, well outside. So I have to compromise. And where you decide to compromise changes the feel of the painting. There's a brilliant, brilliant chapter on this in Harold Speed's book, The Practice and Science of Drawing. I think it's that one and not the painting one. And he talks about different approaches to painting. And there's the kind of the Dutch Golden Age, or the, you know, Rembrandt's approach to values, which is top down. So you start off by hitting the relationships right at the top of the value scale. So you've got the relationships you want. So, you know, you say that you're talking about the relationship between the light value, the lightest value, down to the halftones, say, and you can nail that. You can get that because that's within the range of paint. But then you don't have enough range for your shadows. So what tends to happen is you will get an overall darker painting with lights that stand out. Because you started at the top and worked down. So you went down the value range very quickly because our value range is much narrower in paint than it is in nature. Another way of doing it is working from the bottom up, so that you get the relationship, say, from the shadow to the half-tone right. And then you're a long way up your value range by then, because the range of values in nature is wider than the range that we have in paint. So what happens if you paint that way, you go up the value range very quickly and you end up with an overall lighter painting in which the lights don't stand out so much, but in which the shadows appear to be infused with colour. That's how the Impressionists painted. And if you take a good Impressionist painting, it's especially true of modern Impressionists as well. One of my favourites that I used for this once was a Collie Wisson painting. Collie Wisson's values are masterful, and plein air landscape painter. And if you grayscale, if you take a good Impressionist painting and you grayscale it in Photoshop, it still has a really strong impression of light and shadow. It is not the colour that creates it. People think it's the colour and you've got to have cobalt blue in your shadows and all of this. It's not the colour. It's the value balance that makes it so strong. It's particularly true of Monet's earlier paintings as well, which I think are much better ones for me. When his eye started to go, I mean, it's sad, but he just wasn't painting very well. It's the value balance. And I want to, this is a really long answer I'm giving you here, but I want to have the freedom to interpret that. And yes, you could argue that that I could work out a Monsell string to do it with. Yes, if you wanted to be really pedantic, you could argue that. But I like to work it out as I go, because value is movable. The value balance in the painting is movable, Look, I'm totally getting lost and getting into values here because I'm chit-chatting, which is very naughty. Because that's actually one of my favourite subjects to talk about that you've hit on there. Well, that I suppose that I interjected. Maybe you didn't really mean that, but yeah, value balance is a fascinating thing. I'll do a stream on it. I'll do a stream on it at some point soon. It's I think is one of the most interesting things about painting, and it's very rarely talked about for some reason. Especially since it's a known thing, because Harold Speed was talking about it ages ago. Harold Speed wrote 2 fantastic books. One is The Practice and Science of Drawing, and another one is oh God, what's the oil painting one called? I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, just find Harold Speed's. If you haven't seen them before, if you haven't come across them before, find Harold Speed's books. They're just amazing. It must have been amazing to have learned with someone like him with such a clear understanding of painting and how it works. Oh, sorry, lots of comments I haven't caught up with. Nini says, what's the difference between a solvent and linseed oil? Well, linseed oil is a binder, so it binds the pigment together and it strengthens the paint film. A solvent like Gamsol or terps dilutes the paint, so it weakens the paint film. I will generally use a little bit of both, using less solvent as I go up through the layers of a painting. I mean, I'm not a classical painter at all. It's not an aesthetic that I've ever really felt drawn to. Those kind of careful layered approach to painting. It's not me. I'm a pretty simple painter, really. Not very sophisticated, direct painter. But I do work in multiple stages, these days, which inevitably creates layers of a painting. So I do try to follow as much as I can the fat over lean rule, because you want a strong paint film, right? You don't want to be making paintings that are going to fall apart in a few months. Actually, that can go dark. Like, I think there's a go down to a 4. That's the lowest value I'm prepared to go to there. I think I'm teasing this out a little bit. I think it's coming a bit better now. Soften some of these things. So I'm trying not to get into too much of the small scale detail. I'm trying to stay in the sort of the mid-level forms, if you like, kind of. But also to start to carve out the shapes a little bit too. I think it's beginning to come. Perhaps let that one. It's very, very tempting to start getting into some real detail at this point, but I'm starting to feel the 3 separate forms here now. So that's coming, which is nice. This one here, I want this to be disappearing off into the background with a soft edge. So I think I'm probably going to need to bring in some background color there as well. Chrome is a bit high. That might work. And a little bit of background too. I want that too. So I would overemphasize that there. Bring up this value a little bit. It's so, working into a couch for a second stage, honestly, if you've never tried it, then just try it with some soft synthetics. If you're doing like flower paintings like this, it's almost like they paint themselves. If you can nail the values and get all of that right in the color, then they almost paint themselves, really. It's just a joy to work this way. So this hopefully is showing you like how I would begin to work. Second stage, the point of this little kind of series of streams that I've been doing the last couple of weeks, I suppose, well, this is only the 3rd one, but is to try and show you the first stage really, but then I've kind of got to show you a bit of the second stage so that you can see whether it works or not. You couldn't see if it worked or not. I suppose you can to an extent, because you've got to already have that feeling of light and depth and form, and what I really wanted to show is that depth and that light that actually comes from the 2D thinking at the beginning. It comes from the 2-dimensional kind of making sure the shapes are right, all of that. It comes from that right at the start, more than anything else. It's not the only way to approach painting by any means, but it's a way. And if it makes sense to you and you like it, then, come and learn it with me. But there are obviously many other ways to approach it that work equally well. They all will get slightly different results, of course, I personally like the results that you get with this way of painting. Sorry, I keep getting my head in the way of the painting. I've got my camera set up really badly today. I'm gonna wrap up now because I've shown you what I wanted to show you today. I've started taking the roses a little bit further. I'm tempted to keep painting, but my tummy is grumbling as well. Oh, I'm getting very hungry. Let me have a quick step back and a look and see what I think. I think we're getting there. Hopefully, does that make sense? Can you, Was that enough to show you like how I start to tease out the forms now? And to start to, you know, it's just working into that very basic, very simple setup at the beginning. You know, if you get that right, then this stage is a dream. I mean, it would only take, I'm going to stop now because I'm too tired. I've probably been painting about 8-9 hours now today. What time is it, by the way? I can't actually, can't see the time. What time is it now? 9:10. So I've been going about another hour, so I've been painting past my focus time. But I am actually tempted to keep going because I'm really liking the way this painting is going. But what I'm going to need to do now is to stop and rest and come back to it. I'm definitely going to finish this one because I think it's going so nicely. And I actually have, I think it's spoken for, this painting. I think I'm going to be giving this to a couple of friends, possibly this one or possibly another one. Anyway, I digress. Let me try and catch up. Oh, and when to use them, solvents and linseed oil. Well, yeah, I mean, a solvent, I mean, I would basically try and use that as little as possible. I only use a very small amount at the beginning of a painting because it dries quicker. Oil takes a while to dry, so a solvent is useful at the beginning of a painting. I don't use it to clean my brushes ever. I only ever clean them with soap. So mostly just use oil. Donaldo says, I understand why you don't do one flower at a time. I see all the values now. Yeah, you see, you can tease the smaller forms out once you've got the big bit going. But if I guarantee, and you know, I'm certainly not immune to this, if I tried to work into the detail of those flowers right from the start and paint them one at a time, I would make value mistakes because I'd be focused on a small area instead of seeing the whole. One of the biggest challenges with realistic painting is to be able to see the whole of what you're painting, the big picture and the overall value relationships at the same time as seeing the detail of what you're painting. It's one of the biggest challenges, the hardest things to do. And this is a neat way of getting around that by doing the big picture bit first, you know. Nini says, will there be a video that explains your method painting thin to thick? I'm not sure. Thin to thick. If you mean fat over lean, then that's just standard oil painting practice. It basically means it's not about thick and thin. It's just about having more oil in the paint as you go up through the layers. It just makes for a stronger layer. Giseressa says, I had a teacher who said that once you got the value right, you could use almost any color you want. Yeah, to an extent, that's true. But it depends. Yeah, I mean, it is true, basically. But it depends how... it depends... Sorry, I've just noticed something I want to change. It depends how realistic, I suppose, you want to get. Because my personal feeling is that one of the most important parts of painting, of color, that is people are only really beginning now to understand the importance of, is chroma. And I personally believe it's almost as important, if not as important, as value. Of the three, I think you can play the most with hue. But if your values are good and your chromas are good, you will get a really strong result. If they're slightly out, then it tends not to work so well. James says Rembrandt was also sculpting his highlights. Yes, indeed, he was painting thick paint, thick impastos that he put glazes over. But you know, he's also a master of, like, his drawing wasn't all that great, to be honest, but he was a master of, like, you know, value for sure. Harold Speed, Oil Painting Techniques and Materials, Dover. That is right. That's the one. That is absolutely a fantastic book. Yeah. Thank you, Lena. They paint themselves. Oh, you're hilarious, my dog. Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that it makes, if you have like a reasonable facility with your brush and the drawing is all right, and you've evolved like your color sense and all of that kind of stuff, then yeah, you know, it just makes it a lot easier. Lena says, I'm starting to use this way of approaching painting, and it's been a great learning experience. Brilliant. Great to hear. James says, how many subsequent layers paint are you likely to apply? Honestly, I don't know. I think probably with this one more session would finish the painting. I think probably. I don't think it's going to need a lot more. For this painting, I probably wouldn't do a lot more with this cloth. I would go into, obviously, this area here and resolve the vase. I don't feel that the flowers are going to need an awful lot more. There's some parts of them are a little bit rough. It might need a little bit of work, but apart from that, kind of okay, I think. Mustafa says, which is your favourite team in the Premier League? I must confess, I have never got football. I just don't get it. I've never had the slightest interest in it, and it's very sad because my eldest son is obsessed with it. So I'm sorry to disappoint you. Jerry says, what will you do with all that paint on your palette now that you're quitting for the day? Oh, I chuck it. I know it seems outrageous, but I like to mix fresh paint every day. I don't like to store it because sometimes it just goes a little bit weird, you know, it goes a little bit thick and a little bit weird. See, I'm just looking at this and I'm looking at the cloth here, and really, this should go up in value a little bit, but I like it how it is. I think I'm going to leave it because it really, the flowers are really standing out nicely, I think. I'm happy with this so far. Oh dear. I don't know where those strange spammers come from. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. I really need to go and get something to eat now. I hope I've taken this far enough today in order to show you like a little bit further about how you evolve this method. And the nice thing about it is that with the color control and getting the big picture sorted out first, I've managed to keep these flowers as kind of glowing and standing out from everything else in the painting. And I would almost definitely have lost that in places if I hadn't done it quite this way. There's some things I would still want to resolve a little bit. I really want to work into this flower some more, so I'll probably do one more layer on the flowers, and then I'll do a layer over here, one more layer there probably. So this area will be like 2 layers and this will be 3. And then I think the painting will be pretty much done. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one as well. Oh, by the way, I should put, I'm actually teaching all of this stuff. This approach, this specific approach in a workshop, which starts next week. I'm going to be closing registration for it in the next couple of days. But here for now is a link where you can find out a little bit more about it. It's basically going to be like 6 weeks, 1 live stream a week, in depth, going through this basic approach to building up a painting. And there are going to be some cream roses involved. So I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll try and get on again maybe tomorrow, or maybe Thursday, if I can do it then, or Friday, and show you bringing this painting to a finish, because it's pretty close, I think, now. It's not far off. Another couple of hours probably will do it. Thanks very much, everyone, and I'll see you again soon.